My guest today is Paul McIntyre Royston, President and CEO of the Grand River Hospital Foundation, one of the local hospitals in my hometown of Kitchener-Waterloo in Ontario, Canada. Paul, can you introduce yourself with a few sentences about your present responsibilities, the experience that got you here, and one thing that you're excited to do in the future?
Happy to do so and delighted to be here. So I'm CEO of the Grand River Hospital Foundation, and I was brought in to sort of lead a resurgence, might be a good word to use, sort of a transformation of healthcare fundraising and philanthropy here in Kitchener-Waterloo. And one of the reasons for that is there's a dire need of new infrastructure support. And if you look at sort of where the funding was, it was really struggling. And I happened to come in just before COVID, and so I was already bringing in some transformation, and then COVID happened. And talk about that after. But in terms of my background, I spent a couple of years at the Canadian Olympic Committee as CEO of the foundation in Toronto, and I got to go to the games, which was remarkable, and fundraise for sport. Previous to that, I did about 7 years at the Calgary Public Library Foundation as CEO, and we had a $350 million campaign, public and private, in support of libraries, and in fact, building one incredible brand new central library, adding 3 new ones, and growing 3 other ones.
Okay.
And then before that, I had worked at Hamilton Health Sciences, Sunnybrook Hospital, some sort of healthcare, and then actually with my alma mater, the University of Waterloo, and actually the same faculty I have a degree in. So stumbled into fundraising. My degree's in mathematics, but have fallen in love with the ability of it to truly change the world. And so that's sort of the ethos with which we operate.
Okay. So what I heard in there was that the one thing you're excited to do in the future is change the world.
Absolutely.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so I'm going to kind of back, I think, maybe all the way up to we're Canadian. We have free healthcare. Why do hospitals need a foundation? Right? Like why? Right? I know. Yeah, like why isn't it funded? I don't get a bill. Now, mind you, I don't go there often. I'm very blessed to not have to go there often. But can you talk to me a little bit about what kinds of things, I guess, are not funded then? So if there's a foundation, by logical extension, I'm going to assume that I'm initially incorrect. Not everything's funded. What are you focusing on, or what is your biggest need, would you say, for Grand River?
Well, I'll start with a bit of an anecdote that I've been told actually by the CEO of the hospital, which is the sort of comparison between American hospitals and Canadian hospitals, or for-profit versus not-for-profit hospitals in a large system. And it's that in American hospitals, you're happy when you're full. And Canadian hospitals, you're happy when you're empty. And I think that's actually an important dichotomy, right? And so one of the framings, and it works a little bit different in every province, but in Ontario, it's actually pretty specific. And basically, there's a little bit of nuance, but the government does not fund the equipment that goes inside the hospital. Full stop.
Okay.
So beds, no. IV poles, no. Large equipment like MRIs, X-rays, no. They do not fund that. Now, in a new sort of build of you're building a brand new hospital, which is in the long range plans for us, they fund 90% of that build, but then 10% of the actual bricks and mortar has to be funded in what's called the local share. And then also in a build like that, you're also still funding the entire fit out. So every little bit, couches, carpeting, all of that typically falls to local. And it works out on a larger project somewhere between 23 and 27% of the project goal. So say you're building $1 billion hospital, you're looking at 230 to 270 million minimum from the local share.
From local,
And that's not all fundraising necessarily. It could be from a taxation levy that a city or a regional municipality levies. It could be the sales of assets or other business development funding. So say the hospital has a pharmacy that makes money, or parking. That money can count as part of the local share commitment. When you're building a new build. But so right now, you sort of ended with the question, so what are you fundraising for right now? And we're actually in partnership with our other local hospitals, St. Mary's, and we're fundraising for 2 new MRIs. We're quite
Okay.
underserviced for MRIs in this region, and we have a $10 million joint goal. And those are big numbers, right?
Yeah.
So not only is it buying an MRI, but it's also fitting out the room that it's in. And so the province is putting in money to fund it annually. So they're paying
Okay.
for the staff to operate it, the electricity, whatnot. And that's about give or take $800,000 a year,
Right.
which is great, but
Yes.
we can't use that money nor operate that service until we can buy it, right? And so
Okay.
that gives you an example a little bit. But one of the things we really believe in at our foundation, it's not just, and this actually will, I think, get to some of your future questions that I'm
Mhm.
anticipating, is
Yay.
it's not everyone wants to fund an MRI, right? And so we actually have, and it's not shy to say, we have over 500 different things right now that somebody who wants to support can choose to support. And we very
Okay.
much believe in both freedom of choice and,
Yes.
frankly, if you're, MRI, you don't give a whit about, but if you're
Right.
passionate about, say, puppies and children, we actually
Mhm.
have a program that brings in therapy dogs for both elderly patients as well as children. And so that might be something that is really much more up your alley. And likely, and this is completely the self-interest, you're probably going to give more to that than you would the MRI. So we can actually get more funding to support that and other programs throughout the health system.
Okay. That
Does
is
that help?
interesting. I mean, that seems like a really big number of initiatives. And again, I've had personally really limited contact with the healthcare system up to this point. But I do love the idea that there's so many options, because I think sometimes, and we'll maybe get into this a little bit more later, that $10 million for an MRI, I think in some moments it feels like, but if I had, if I was trying to make a decision on $300, is that really going to make a difference to you? Do you know what I mean? Like
Do.
it feels like a bit of a tiny check. And I think if I was looking for somewhere to give at Christmas, maybe I would skip over that one if I didn't know to look, or I didn't know that I could make a discernible difference. And I'm certainly not saying that 300 towards 10 million doesn't make a discernible difference, because quite frankly, if enough of us did that, we would be done and we'd have the 10 million. But I think sometimes it feels like such a
Daunting.
tiny, nickel into the bucket that does it matter.
Well,
Um,
so I think you've hit one nail on the head, and there's a lot of different ones, but it's this idea in a lot of shops, and they even advertise, they would say annual giving, like make a gift every year, and
yeah.
I don't like that term because I find it puts an onus on the community to give every year,
Okay.
which I don't think is fair, right? Because I think giving should never feel like an obligation. In fact, the entire taxation model of it is that it can't be. It has to
Yes.
truly be given without conditions
Okay.
from a perspective of getting things for your gift. But
Right.
I use the term impact giving because if you add it all up, it makes an incredible impact. And you've already alluded to that, right? So
Hmm.
300 times 1,000 people is $300,000, and we go to multiple avenues, not just from a donor perspective, but also from a purchase perspective. So we happen to sell pins and other things here. I'm just pulling one up. We
Hmm.
have a Christmas one
Oh,
and so on, and we don't make a lot of money on these. But
okay.
if I sell a pin for $10, our profit margin is about $8 on that, and
Okay.
then all of that funding can get rolled in to the highest priority need. So if we
Okay.
can't get the amount of donors to add up to be the MRI project at 10 million, and thankfully I think we're over 9 million already raised, which is wonderful.
Okay.
So yes, $300 really can't help.
Yes.
Always be asking as a fundraiser.
Hang on. Wait a minute.
But it's this idea that we really want to engage you in a lot of different ways, because whether it's
Okay.
attending an event, we've had lots of events for the MRI, for example, this year. We had a big
Mhm.
gala, there was a golf tournament, and we try to package it together just like any family would. Oh, how are we going to pay for this renovation? Oh, well, dad's going to give us, $10,000 to help with the kitchen. I'm going to go get the second job and mow some lawns on the side, and you're
Right.
going to cobble it together, which it seems actually quite reasonable. Because
Right.
very rarely is someone going to say, "Oh, I'm going to give you $10 million to do that." It happens,
Yes.
but we can never count on that. And
Right.
frankly, most larger donors don't want to be holding the whole bag on something, right?
Right.
They want to share the risk.
Yes.
There's not a lot in this context, but you want to share that. You want it to be part of something as opposed to just being the only one who does something.
Okay. Okay. So can you gave me, I think, a bit of a glimpse of just how maybe broad kind of what hospitals do is. And so can you just give me a sense of, when I say hospital, again, to me personally, at this stage, because of my experience, it means, I've been there like once for a really minor procedure. My kids have been there, fortunately, almost never. And my parents have yet to be there for anything like that. So can you just give me a sense, though, of, I could maybe come up with like critical care and surgery that you do, but can you give me a sense of kind of what happens in the region and when like this hospital network, you mentioned too, the St. Mary's I can see from my office window, in fact, kind of what that means, where hospitals and healthcare, kind of what does that mean to the region? Because what I'd like to get a little bit more towards is how this is related to really every single conversation I have with a client. No matter how old the client is, at some point they say some version of, what if I lose my health? Right? If you're younger, you might have a glimmer that maybe one day, what if I were to be disabled? What if I couldn't work? As you get older, you realize that physical bodies betray you in unexpected ways, right? And we talk about care then, but this whole idea, so this comes up across the board, right? So, and we often talk about it like, I can't really control it. I'm scared of it because I can't really control it. But I think it's interesting in this context to think, well, if I am worried about that, and there is a foundation that is focused on improving the level of healthcare in my region, maybe in fact I do have some control over this in an interesting way.
Yeah. So that's such a brilliant question, and I'm going to attempt to unpack it because I think it has lots of different variables.
Yeah.
So you'll see, I think you can see behind me here this statement: to rally every member of our communities to ensure world-class healthcare right here.
Right.
And that's a very important statement for our hospital in particular, because it is not about our hospital.
Okay.
It is very much about a health system, because one cannot work without the other. And frankly, you've alluded to a few times that you haven't used our services, which is wonderful. So thank you for not using our services. But once again, that difference between the Americans.
Anytime, believe me, we are both committed to this.
But it's this idea, right? Like, but you want it there when you need it, right? When it matters most is probably a line at an old hospital I used to work for. That was their tagline: when it matters most. And because fundamentally, we've got to have that. Even in a we're in a public system here, even in a privatized model, you still really need that in your community. And this idea of world class, there can be some objective measures. I'm actually not concerned about objective measures. I want it to be a subjective measure. So I want everyone in our community here to feel like they're going to have that. And our care from our staff is remarkable. And if you objectively, very high rankings across the board in almost every discipline, like some really good stuff. Our infrastructure is severely lacking. It's quite dated. It's old. We're definitely not trending well with the population. And so hence the large ask to build new infrastructure with the province and to grow that.
Okay.
But it is this community piece, right? So when I talk to the community, it's okay. You will use the health system. From birth, almost for sure you were born in the hospital. Not everybody, but almost for sure. And almost for sure you're going to use this at end of life, right? Yes. And you got to assume somewhere in that 85 plus years, there's going to be an interaction.
Yep.
Maybe one of like 2 million, it's, but, and that's our catchment actually by about 2040 is going to be 2 million between ourselves and our friends at St. Mary's in this region and shape our footprint, right? And you asked me sort of what areas. And so you'll see a little logo down here, and it's the Care Never Stops campaign for Grand River Hospital. And there's 8 petals. And so each one of those petals actually represents a key care area. The 2 largest petals are Grand River Kids, children, and the Grand River Regional Cancer Center. So those are the two main petals. On top of that, we have mental health, which is a huge priority for our hospital, and kidney.
Yes.
And then at the bottom, buttressing sort of that, there's the continuum of care, which is both seniors and disability and sort of complex issues. And then you have emergency and critical care, and our emergency department's heavily used. And then the remaining 2 petals are not actual care areas, but the main one inside, sort of that internal part of the lotus, is patient experience, elevating how important that aspect of the journey is. Aside from just medical care, it's everything around that. And then the top, sort of the petal that thrusts up above, is innovation and learning, because we recognize that we have an ability and a need, in fact, to continually get better and to grow. And we're in a very unique region with a lot of innovative technologies. And how do we leverage that to truly create this world-class healthcare system? And so our friends you hear what I didn't mention cardiac, which our friends at St. Mary's do so incredibly well. And we partner with them in so many ways. Our staff is all at the doctors are all conjoined. We have a number of integrated departments. So we work very closely with them on that. And they also do eyes and some other care areas. So it really is about a partnership. And we also partner locally with a lot of community agencies to ensure a broad range across the health system.
Okay. And again, I think it's interesting that if I'm not paying attention and I hear Grand River Hospital Foundation, I think narrow that down to hospital, which, I do support all those things. But again, pulling it back to, I'm having this conversation with every single client and trying to build into their individual plan about what if I need care, right? What if I need care, and how are my resources going to do that? How am I going to set this up to do that? And I think it's interesting to maybe pull it back a little bit and say, can I contribute to my community differently so that I'm in some ways building a joint safety net, right? So I would be maybe shifting the community so that I'm safer, right? And so is everybody else, right? Like how can we do this so that everybody else, because that's also another important piece of conversations that I have with clients. I wouldn't say that one is necessarily with 100% of clients about giving back to community. And again, it's not in depth with 100% of clients, but it often comes up. And I think it often comes up and they want to do it, but we don't know how. Yeah. And so part of what I wanted today to be was really an opportunity for my listeners to hear you talk about why you do what you do, so that they really understand that there is so much kind of passion on your side for changing the community and changing our experience. And I think sometimes as donors, we somehow miss that part. And I'm not sure why that happens, but I often will sometimes get hesitation from clients on giving. And what they say is, sometimes we'll use phrases like, I think their admin costs are too high, right? I would give to them, but their admin costs are too high. And I think if we get down to it, what they mean is I don't know that they're committed to changing the landscape, or I don't know how passionate they are. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's almost like they can't quite hear. They're kind of hearing some administrative body is asking for money because it's Christmas. Um, and I think there's a miss. Like, when I talk to people who run organizations or people who work at organizations, I wish they could hear kind of the if this is a pre-COVID term, the lunchroom conversations, right? About what you want to happen, about, if you had a magic wand, if you got a really big gift, like, what would you do? And I think if we could get those two conversations happening at the same time, it would maybe give people more understanding of what's possible.
So I love your question, Sarah, because there's 7 in 1. So
I know. Good luck.
Tricky. So I'm going to start. I'm going to start with one, and it's kind of right above my head. I don't know if you can read.
Yeah.
Those are our foundation values, and one of them, and the hospital always quotes this back to me. The first one at the top is enable easy, because you have so many charities talking to you. You have all this need. It is so confusing, right? Like, who knows what to do? And so what I love is our partners at the hospital have basically, they put this into the world. They have a very bold strategic vision at aiminghigh.ca, which is to fundamentally create this world-class healthcare system here. And the system side is really the key. And so I want to start there with this answer. And how do we enable easy for that? Well, frankly, we're an incredible supporter financially of St. Mary's, either through our donors who then designate to St. Mary's or just for projects there. We also do the same at other hospitals, and we actually help many other causes. And in fact, we're the fundraiser for the Ontario Health Team, which is sort of a conglomeration of 40 agencies. And we actually do fundraising for them and with them. And it's important, and we're going to do an event next year. We're inviting all the health causes, because fundamentally we're realizing that we need to make it a little bit easier for donors. And so there can almost be a one-stop shop. And I'll get to some other stuff in a second, but I think it's really important to recognize, and your donors should know this, that you can designate. So say you write a check and you say to a charity, I want to support, let's do puppies and children.
Right.
And you put that in the memo of your check or in a note to them. They are legally obligated and can't give you a tax receipt unless they use it for what you stated.
Okay.
They actually can get in trouble and lose their charitable license. So if we couldn't do something with children and puppies, we could not cash that check. And I think that's important to note, because often I think sometimes people feel it's going into like some big pocket war chest somewhere and so on. And so
surely somebody else is deciding, right?
Yeah,
like I know you said I responded to the puppy poster, but
true. I'm glad I got kid on the puppies. But no, I'm a fundamental believer. Like I think the fourth value down is transparent first. So if you go to our site, grhf.ca or careneverstops.ca, you'll see a lot. I hope is a lot of transparency. I fundamentally believe it is. Tons of all of our financial statements, all of that. We have it very open, because if you want to delve into that, please. We like unrestricted funds, because then the hospital can say, this is our next most important thing. We need money for that.
Yeah.
But, and if you go to our site, you'll see there are loads of different projects in each of those care areas I talked about, because you might have more of a passion for Y and another person might have more passion for X. And I want to go to this admin comment a little bit too. And it's over the last 5 years, I think all of the big U.S. foundations, now they were talking like the Carnegies, the Fords, ones that have billions upon billions of assets, have really changed their tune with respect to admin costs. Okay. Because they understand that you can't, because charities were getting stripped. Because if you say 100% of the money you give cannot go to any admin costs, we can't do that. And then we pull from other money, like we literally can't.
Okay.
So it's if you say must go to patient care, yes. You could make maybe some potential, but we can't do that. And so I used to work with a fundraiser who was a bit extreme in these regards. He said, how come a grocery store can spend 98 cents to make $1? And that's a 2% margin, a little bit off in the math if I look at it that way, but it gives you an example. And that's, that's profit margins in groceries. And that's great.
Yes.
Yet we hold charities, and CRA starts to investigate as soon as we're over sort of 35 cents on the dollar, which is almost 3 to
Right.
1. So we're turning 35 cents into $1, and that's too extreme. Now that's not quite the right analogy, but I bring that up because you really got to think about it. And then another one I like to do as an analogy is, okay, so if I spend $1 million and I raise $5 million with that, that is we use the term cost per dollar raised, so that'd be a 20-cent cost per dollar. Okay.
Right.
Now compare that instead to spending $2.5 million to raise $10 million. That's a 25 cents per dollar raise. So it's higher. It's 5% more. But this is what I would put to the community. What makes a bigger impact? Is it the $4 million or is it the 7.5? And so it's an interesting argument, right? Like I would argue, frankly, on the 7.5, because I desperately know how much the health system needs it. And one last comment to that is to our first one of your first questions was, what does the government fund? What does it not do? Why do we even exist as a foundation?
Yes.
And, right. And this is the crux of it. And actually our CEO at the hospital says this really, really well. The government gets us to good.
Right. Okay.
Adequate, very rarely great. Because in what jurisdiction can government ever produce something that's great? Just being a little bit pedantic, I'm pro-government, but they can't. They can't. And so it's the donor dollars. It's that extra funding that takes us to great, excellent, and world-class. And we can't do it without it. We can't. The system is both designed to fail if you don't have that. And the more we get, the more great we can be. And so it's up to the community to come together.
Okay. And I think, I may be the only one in Canada that missed that. And if I am, then that's fantastic news because we've solved that problem for Canada today. I'm
your bold ambitions here, Sarah. This is great.
Thanks. I'm also hoping that as people are listening to this, they are kind of just able to understand what is actually happening in their own community, wherever they are, because I have listeners in a lot of different places. So I think it's just really exciting to start thinking and hopefully using pieces of this conversation, and whether as a listener you're applying it directly to, healthcare funding, hospital funding, or any organization that you are considering, right? I think a lot of your words and a lot of your reason for doing this are really broadly applicable. So I'm hoping people kind of hear it from wait a minute, if somebody got into, fundraising, or if I've got an organization contacting me, what if they kind of have the same passion that Paul has for this, right? What would that mean then if I were to donate to them, right? So I'm hoping that this conversation is both kind of specifically applicable and really broadly applicable to, as people are trying to evaluate where to give, once they've decided to give, how do you make that decision? Because there is, a ridiculous number of charities in Canada that do a lot of different things. And so it can be an overwhelming choice for people, I think.
Well, it absolutely can. And, there's over 80,000 registered the last time I looked, right? And so, and some overlapping and duplicating, right? That's unquestionable.
Right.
Often because there's different sort of missions and beliefs. But one of the things that I think is really, really important is for people to align their giving with their own values. Right? You and I were talking a little bit about just sort of, the health system and you need. So obviously I'm going to make the case for health system, but having this conversation with my own father, and he's 72, 73 next year. And, talking about estates and will, and he's being smart and planning these things. But, I don't particularly want or need his money. I think he should decide to do what he wants with that. It's his money. And
Yeah.
there's some amazing, you can basically eliminate the tax you pay in your estate, right?
Yes.
We actually have a calculator on our site that allows you to do that, to sort of figure it out.
Right.
But people don't, they don't think of that, right? But like, think about that impact. Like, if you believe in puppies and children, right? Like,
Right.
if that's your thing, or if
Yes.
cravat wearing turtles, okay, I bet you there's
Right.
a charity for that. And so, don't give to
Yeah.
me, don't give to the hospital,
Right.
give to them, because
Yes.
then you're forwarding the money you earned to the things that you care about the most. And I would say, for everybody working in my field of philanthropy, like, that's what we want, because then we'll align the right donors to the passion, and we'll get
Mhm.
that funding, and we won't have to necessarily just get the government support. It can really be really incredible and powerful, because you're aligning the things you care about the most with your
Okay.
earnings, your opportunities.
Okay. I'm going to sidetrack a little bit, and we're going to see where this goes, because this wasn't in my outline at all. Can you talk to me a little bit just about? Actually, I think I'm going to hold that.
Oh, I'm
I'm going to
excited
email
now.
you something. I know. How much time have you got, though? Because it's 1:45.
I've got tons of time. Keep going.
Okay, then I am going to keep going. So you mentioned that you did a stint out west with libraries.
Yeah, it's actually, you can see it right here.
Yes. Okay. From what I understand, the only reason that we now have publicly funded libraries is because there was enough private persistence, and that's what got it started, and then governments took over, right? So I think the other place that can become either confusing or maybe a place to land if the decision to give feels overwhelming is sometimes people will say, well, if it was really necessary, the government would fund it, right? Like stop talking to me about this whatever thing, because if it was really broadly necessary, the government would fund that. And I have a really great article, which now that I've said it out loud, I'm going to have to go find somewhere in my digital filing drawer, about things that we now very easily accept as public policy, that only came about because there were enough people committed to funding it until it got to public policy, including seatbelt laws.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, I mean, now it seems ridiculous because there is such a clear safety value, but there was a time that was not clear. And so I would love to have you crystal ball the idea of, so if we could really come to terms with Canada's healthcare systems is comprehensive only for this list of things. It is not totally comprehensive, and this list over here needs to be supported by community. Could you see a time where maybe it became more comprehensive? Is that possible? Do we want that? Say whatever you want to say here.
Once again, a 7-pronged question. So
Yeah,
I'm gonna unpack it right back to the beginning, which is I know the story of the libraries really well, right? So
yeah.
that was Andrew Carnegie, and
Yes.
before then, there were really no public libraries. A few groups of people got together and shared books, but it wasn't really a thing. And there was a lot of issues. He was considered an incredible union busting, rampant evil capitalist at the time, very much so. And yet he was building these libraries. And in fact, in Calgary, where I worked, there was women. Actually, there was a woman named Annie Davidson who knocked door to door around Calgary, and actually had to do it 3 times because she didn't get enough votes for city council to entertain. Once again, this alludes to one in the hospital, paying a fee for a head librarian. Yeah. Because if they had enough investment from the city, just a little bit from operating, then Andrew Carnegie would kick in the capital to build the building. And they ended up getting $80,000 and floor plans to build Calgary's first library, and it was in 1912. And most North American cities, I think there's 2,900 in total, have a
Mhm.
Carnegie Library. There's one around the corner from me here in Kitchener. It's now a theater, but it was once the Carnegie Library. And that truly
Okay.
is the only reason. And so why I stress that is the government is, it's the politics, right? Like they're only going to invest really in where the need is, and philanthropy can wag the dog as the
Yeah.
tail, right? And that's the power of it, right? So if we can get the community invested in something, that actually makes the change. So we talked about wanting to change the world. You've hit
Yes.
it on the head. I
Yes.
really believe in building community, and I think there's a whole bunch of different ways to do it. It's why I have fundraising libraries and sports and universities. It's not about the money. It's about the change you can bring by investing time, energy, volunteership, all of those things in a concept and idea. And so getting to the tail end of your question, which was where do we prognosticate? Where do we crystal ball to?
Ah.
It's this idea of, okay, the US has privatized healthcare pretty much, right? Canada has public healthcare
Right.
mostly, right?
Hmm.
There's so many nuances to those statements.
I know. We'll let that go for today.
and there's a real fear of two-tier healthcare, although there's a strong argument you
Yes.
can make we already have a version of two-tier healthcare.
Yes.
So I'm going to throw all that out the window. And
Okay.
I'm going to instead do a term actually that I recently was chatting with a few of my board members around. So forget privatization of healthcare. What about non-profitization of healthcare?
Okay.
What if we looked at, okay, the government will and should do some, and
Mhm.
you described the share of building a new hospital here, right? Like they're already up to a certain point.
Yeah.
What if we can engage with the community in all those different levels to make those things better, to create innovations, right? You look at even, research that's done at universities around North America, a lot of that is donor funded. Government certainly
Yes.
does an incredible support, yes, but it's even at the hospital. Like we're a large hospital and there's a large budget. Almost all of it is tied by government funding. Oh, it must be spent on X, must be spent on Y, must be spent on Z.
Right.
Donor
Right.
dollars allow them to spend on those things that the government won't let them,
Okay.
or they just don't have room in the government budget to do. So it provides a flexibility and nimbleness that government so often lacks.
Okay.
There's a
Okay.
lot of things there, but
Yes. Yes. Thank you for that, because I think sometimes the other deep hesitation that we maybe have as donors, and I think it is very hard to articulate, is this sense of I wanted my donation to change the world. I wanted my donation to make a difference. And sometimes I think maybe we don't see that the organization is committed to that. Or sometimes, again, we almost boomerang it back on ourselves. And as soon as I say I wanted my donation to change the world, there's a little voice in the back of my head that's going to say, well, how is your stupid $300 going to change the world? Do you know what I mean? And so we almost can paralyze ourselves into not contributing and not, and so I kind of sometimes think about what if even 100 of us changed our mind on that this year? Right. And then what? And then what?
Because I wanted to see if I have it here. No, I can't find
Okay.
it. That's what I wanted. I wanted to show you our coffee token, because I think it really speaks to what you're talking about, and I'll explain why. So just before the pandemic, we actually created these little coins. They're quarter sized, made out of copper, with an American company. They make coins. It wasn't terribly expensive, and it was going to be a thank you for donors when they visited the hospital at one of our coffee shops. And it was just basically just as a nice thank you to donors. COVID hit, and we're like, we can't do that now. And so somebody on my team had the most brilliant idea they could possibly have had. Let's give them to staff. But instead of just giving them to staff, we actually put it online and let our donors picture standing in line with a doctor, standing in line with a nurse or another caregiver, and being able to buy them a coffee.
Right.
And within half an hour, The
Hmm.
tweet that one of our board members did, we'd sold $16,000 worth of coffee.
Come on.
And absolutely. And it's not like the coffee is going to change the world, but we know, and we still see it day to day because we provide our managers and staff with the ability to help their teams, that a coffee like that on a really rough day in the
Yeah.
emergency room or in the operating room, like it changes their lives. Like they know that it's come from you, right? Like,
Right.
and it's a silly $2 coffee. And if you go to grandcoffee.ca, you'll see our whole coffee thing there. Like,
Okay.
but and we do meals as well, and they're $10. But it's not, and we make $0. Like there's no profit margin for us on those at all, because we
Right.
fundamentally we want to make it feel for you, the community, that you're doing that, right? And
Okay.
why we do that is because small gestures, like we know this in our own lives, right?
Right.
Like
That's what I'm saying is we
small
know
gestures make a
this.
huge difference. And it makes a difference in a lot. Like we have 4,700 staff, including docs,
Okay.
at Grand River Hospital, and
Yeah.
they are all having a heck of a time. And all of your listeners in your community, hospitals just suck right now with
Yeah.
RSV, with COVID, with everything going on. It is brutal, and we're short
Right.
staffed, and no one wants to work in nursing and healthcare. It feels like right now, and so all of those things. The big request we got at Christmas is just like, a new microwave for the nursing lounge, like small things that just, and big things as well, like when equipment breaks and so on.
Sure.
I have to be there for that. But that's why I view it as a sort of a circle of opportunities. So I want to work with a donor to get, that $300 to help buy the MRI. I want you to
Okay.
buy a pack of 5 coffees for your dad got cared in the ED, and there was these 5. We even sell them in a vending machine now in the hospital, so you can
Do
actually buy them.
you?
Yeah, so
That's so
you're
great.
there for cancer care. You can go buy and
Yeah.
you take the coins and you give them to the staff who helps. Like, because life is hard. Let's make it better, right? Like, and all those moments, those gestures, and we sell swag and hats and so on, and but it makes a difference. And yeah,
Yes.
I'm just putting that all together.
Okay.
I get very
Okay.
heated about this, apparently.
Which is why you're good for this, right? Again, I think sometimes again, from the donor side, I think sometimes from what can feel like endless requests, these things in the mail. I did something one time and now I'm on everybody's list asking for money, right? Like I just go away. The government tells me there's inflation. I must not have any money left. So I think sometimes what we miss in the things that are easy to get out, and you need to get them out. Like as a foundation, we can only put you out there so many times. You've got the same 24 hours in a day that we all have. But what I wanted for today was for listeners to really be able to hear, like, does this matter to you? Right? Do you just like the title president? Do you not care what you're president of? Like, I don't know. They don't know. Yeah, because I think again, it's so easy when we're all busy with our own lives to maybe not stop and think, right? Like I personally love my own career and I will do a lot of things for my career because I really, really love it. But I might not pick up a mailing from the Grand River Hospital Foundation and immediately think, wow, I bet they really love their jobs. Wait a minute, they've staked their career on this. There must be something to it, right? And I think that gets so easily missed. We could probably argue in a number of areas, but we're talking about giving today. So I think that gets missed, is that there is an entire team of people that have staked their careers on this is important. Giving to this hospital is important, not because it gives me a job, but because it does all these other things. And I think I really, again, when I go back to that other side of the conversation that I have with clients about, and I think we've kind of covered this, often we think about, how we, and that's the individual we, how we might cover ourselves for healthcare. Like, how can I buffer that risk? Or how can we buffer that risk? But really today we're kind of talking about how we collectively can buffer this risk. And I think that does become community changing and therefore life changing for all of us. So when we, again, that real deep need that we find very hard to say, that when I give, I actually want to change the world. Like I am bold enough to say, I would love it if I, in conjunction with other people, could actually solve this problem, change the world, and change the way that we're living. And so I think that is really huge. If we could get even partway there today.
Well, let me add some nuance to that, because I talked about it
Yeah.
before, of this idea of having different ways to give. I've talked about the coffee now. I mentioned the pin.
Yeah.
Why we truly do that is because we're all different, right? So
Right.
I have a donor who bought a C-arm, which is an instrument related to cancer, and they had cancer, and so there was a really nice alignment. We've had another one buy a shower chair because their dad, really had difficulty showering when they were in the hospital, and we just didn't have enough to go around. So things that are really connected to what. And then we introduced this new product actually called a care ship. And it's sort of been around, but think about it as like a scholarship for your care. And I'm actually doing one after my mom, who passed away when she was 49 and had a really difficult journey. But the idea of a care ship is it actually allows the hospital social workers to provide for people who are undergoing a very challenging illness journey, whether it be cancer or kidney or any area, and actually literally provides them with funds. And because if you think about it, say you're dealing with a cancer and you're out of a job, and cancer is very expensive on a family. And the medical equipment, if you need help with medical aids, we actually have a massive unfunded drug. We give the hospital over $1 million a year to actually pay for drugs that the government won't fund. But it's this idea of the care ship. And so we have a few named care ships, so people can actually get, just like you would name a scholarship at a university. It's exactly the same concept. Because we believe, so because some people like getting their name on things, and the one with my mom is we're just fundraising for it now, is going to have her name on it. But it's because it's a way to honor her as well, right? There's a lot of nuance in this, and I'm going to see how big I can get it, but it'll be, you can endow it and the interest payout, or you can just pay it out. And the stories we get from the few that we already have, it's all of a sudden these patients can just like worry and just focus on healing and focus on taking care of themselves. And we paid for phone bills sometimes. We'll pay for transit if they truly can't afford it, right? It's finding these ways. And that's why I love things like this, and our ability to work with our hospital to solve, not just, we need to buy a piece of equipment X, and that's critically important. Government doesn't fund it.
Yes.
But it's also the entire process of this journey. And one of the other ones that I want to mention, because it almost will sound, when I say it, a bit selfish. So for individuals. So before COVID, we were actually still charging for Wi-Fi for patients, and which was just silly. And so, especially in Waterloo, so we invested donor money in upgrading and creating just for patients high-speed Wi-Fi network at no cost. We got a bunch of donations of Chromebooks and iPads, and we're still always looking. We loan those out to patients as well at no cost. And we're also introducing the ability to order things right to the bedside. So whether it even be a coffee from the Tim Hortons, or say you're going in for a few days, you can actually create, and this is going to sound kind of funny, a care registry. So you know what? I'd love if I could get a massage and a robe and a pizza delivered, and your Uncle Joe in the Bahamas, who has more money than sense, can can put some money into your care registry, and so you have a better time of it, and it works for the hospital because you're spending less time in the bed, right? It's all this patient journey piece with all these other variables that we can add in and work with the community to help change and solve and evolve.
Okay. I do think that's really interesting, because you're right. I think we do flip between, just a moment ago you said this might sound kind of selfish, and all I heard was, Are you saying that if I happen to land in a bed, there is a way for me to get back out faster? Because you seem great, Paul, but God, I don't want to be there. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, that is not selfish. That is good planning.
Right? And how do we get each other out faster? Right? Like
yes.
How do we, and you use the rigor of the science, but we also know that people who feel more cared for.
Yes.
Exit faster.
Yes.
Which saves the system money, which means there's more room for you.
Right, which I don't want to use. I will give it to somebody else. But you're right. There is this whole funny, really good circle, right? We often talk about negative spirals, but there is this really interesting good circle of, wait a minute, if we could build a system that was so good that we were hardly spending any time there. Wow, that sounds amazing, right? That sounds so relaxing. But again, as you say, it's there if I need it.
And truth be told, we get, in all hospitals, get a number of gifts in wills, legacy gifts.
Yes.
Where, when you read the language in the will, that really is their intent. And,
yes.
we call our own program Care Forward, the idea of paying it forward. And we fundamentally, longer term, that's probably the main way that we'll be able to do these advancements and these extras to help create world class. Is this idea of people saying, you know what, I'm going to really invest. And I love doing it in real time. I just had this incredible person who just shared that they were putting $500,000 in their will towards us. They're 80.
Okay.
And we're going to honor, though, while they're still alive. Right? Because
right.
Why wait? Like, why?
Yes.
Let's celebrate that, right? Let's
right.
tell that story. And so it's really interesting because there's so many different ways to help. And I believe in the personification or the personalization of philanthropy, because you're going to love it more. And I've had the privilege of working with a few people who had only ever given small amounts, and then we work with them to really align their passions, and have taken a few people from $1,000 to over $1 million, like from long term.
Right.
And their lives, like they get mad at me because now they're addicted to giving. Right? Because it's so, in a good man, they're so passionate about it because they see the impact they can actually make on both individuals and on society. And it's awesome.
It is exciting. And I think, one of the clients that I worked with, I got to see kind of the beginning of her giving, because a lot of her money was inherited. So initially there was kind of that paralyzing, that's a lot of money and it's my parents' money, right? And so it took her some time to get used to the money, and she started giving in smaller amounts. And she was very, she actually, I think, did a really good job of finding charities that aligned with her values. She was able to find some that really specifically aligned. There were a couple of specific things that she really loved, and she went and found organizations that did that. And again, this is probably a whole other topic, but just that idea of, I will give if I get a tax receipt. And that is important. I have a whole thought on that, which I will write out later. But what was so interesting to me was after a couple of years, and she was increasing her giving, and then we had booked an appointment for her to meet with somebody to do a donor advised fund. So she was going to do, she had a pretty solid list of charities. They were in a high tax bracket. So part of this was, look, you've already agreed to give this money. Let's take a lump sum, set it aside. It's going to be given as you wish. That was all good. She actually canceled the appointment last minute. And she said, I thought about it, and I like the interactions with the charities. I like doing the donations every year. I don't want to give that up by going to a donor advised fund. And I thought that was such a beautiful thing for so many reasons, and I think it, again, goes to a lot of what our conversation has been, is if we find that personal connection to an organization, that I think is where we get community change and that grassroots change that we're all kind of looking for right now. Right?
Very well said. Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else, Paul, that you would like listeners to know or to think about? And I get that that's an unfair question because
Yes,
obviously
easily,
the answer is yes, 12,000 things, Sarah. Thanks so much.
Yeah, you know what? I think it's this. It's in charities, in nonprofits like ours, like we're very deliberately partnered with a sister organization. Like our purpose is to support them,
Okay.
to enable easy for them to make them as great as they can, right? And
Mhm.
we're sort of different than, because we don't do a lot of direct charitable action where other causes would, right?
Right.
But so there's kind of those two different. I use the term actually cause profit, which is a bit perhaps dangerous, but it's the idea of seeking profit for your cause. So we are
Okay.
absolutely doing that because we fundamentally believe that the more we can provide the hospital truly helps achieve that sort of long-term vision, this idea of cause profit. But it's why I really liked your last comment was the charity's going to mostly want that too, right? Sometimes charities are going to
Right.
feel a little bit like, wait a minute, the donor wants us to do these things, and so I would say it has to be about a dialogue.
Yes.
Trying to force one vision on won't work, and that's why you should shop around, find the care,
Hmm.
and find those causes that resonate with you. And often it's a founder, often it's the CEO, just because they're like a figurehead. But I've got a great but small but mighty team of people who connect throughout our community in lots of different
Hmm.
ways, right? And a lot increasingly, especially since COVID, a lot of that interaction is happening online. Like
Yes.
we have a chat bot on our system. It's actually not a bot. It connects to people. It's
Okay.
kind of important, right? And you can literally reach anybody from my team.
Okay.
My phone number, in fact, is on our website. And actually I have a link to book a
I
meeting
did
with
notice it.
me
Yes.
at any time, because
Right.
so few people actually do it that it is, but
Yes.
please, call me. Yeah. I will meet with you, because we believe fundamentally. Like, I don't care who I talk to, because and I don't just want to meet with people who can give us a pile of money. I want to actually meet with
Mhm.
anybody who's passionate enough to want to talk about what we're trying to do.
Okay.
And I would say that goes for 99% of all charities. They really do fundamentally believe, and spend some time getting to know them. And
Okay.
yeah, I think that would be it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That is a great, I think, wrap up thought for today. Thank you so much for your time today, Paul.
It was a blast. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay.